Hi, I'm Meg Major with Wednesday Grocery Business. Welcome to Grocery COVID Live. Joining me per usual this week is John Springer, our executive editor, Jenn Strailey, our senior editor, and Kat Martin, our content manager. Before turning it to Phil, just like to note that we are still fully immersed in the heavy news cycle, which shows no signs of slowing down. And one of the latest headlines that caught our eye is a report that appeared over the weekend in CNN Business, which states that some experts are calling for grocery stores to move to a fully remote model of pickup and delivery only. So I think that that's a great lead in, Phil. What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, Meg, what we are seeing is we are seeing certain retailers closing certain stores just to do that, to be able to keep up with the volume. To do it universally, from a public health standpoint, probably a good idea. But I think emotionally, it's a terrible idea. It really sends a signal to shoppers that the food industry is out of control, that we just can't supply things, that we've got to do it that way. And then what about all that added cost? I mean, John has talked about this a lot, that right now the stores have free labor with us going in the store and taking things and putting it in our basket. If they have to start hiring people to do that, whether it's for curbside or for delivery, I think it's too expensive, number one. And number two, I think it's just silly. But some good news for you, Meg, is that Publix must be listening to our COVID-19 podcast, because you might have seen that as of yesterday, Publix across the entire chain is making it mandatory to have all their employees wear face masks. So you called them out first, and they're listening. So that's the good news. On a programming note, let's just make sure that you have your Facebook comments posted as we go through. We're also going to test something new today. We're going to take a couple polls, get your opinions on that. Also, for this Thursday change of plans, we're going to be at 12 Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. So COVID-19 next week will be at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So please make a note and please join us for that. But before that, I'd like everybody's comment on this new farm rescue package. $19 billion now. It will have another $14 billion added in July. Probably the most interesting thing for me in this package, and the USDA has not published the specifics of where $16 billion of it's going to go yet, but John Hoeven from North Dakota, who's the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Ag Panel, says that $9.5 billion will go to cattle, dairy, and hog farmers, and then the rest divided among row crops, specialty crops, and other crops. But most interesting to me is that the USDA will buy $3 billion in surplus farm products and redistribute them to food banks, faith groups, and other nonprofits. For starters, the department will get $100 million each of meat, dairy, and fresh produce per month. Any thoughts, any comments? Kat, what do you think?
Well, I wrote a story about this yesterday, and $100 million per month is, pretty significant for produce, meat, and dairy. I think, is that what you said? So that's helpful. The thing that gives me a pause, I think, is that these are all going to be boxes to food banks, which I think is wonderful. But a couple of years ago, Sonny Perdue announced, this big, wonderful project that he wanted to do, where it was SNAP boxes being sent to recipients. And so I just am wondering if this might be kind of the first step towards that, because his original plan obviously was shut down by the grocery industry because they want those people in their stores making those purchases in store.
Yeah, but there's another thing about the program, and I had written about it when it first came out, also saying that I thought it was one of the stupidest ideas I ever heard of. Most SNAP recipients don't have a place where they can get a box and have it secure. So I envision the same thing happening as we see around Christmas time with people stealing boxes of Amazon packages, that it's delivered to their house. It is not in a secure place, and a neighbor or somebody else just goes by and they steal it.
Certainly, that's a flawed model from the start, but would it not be, when you really think about it, could it not be something that it could be a pickup system? But even still, it diminishes a consumer's choice, and that's really not the point of just giving people the things equivalent to free cheese in bygone era.
Exactly. Also, John Frank has commented that delivery has been a nightmare in my Chicago suburb. No order has arrived complete from either Walmart or Jewel. Delivery is a fragile system. We don't have enough people, and the idea of maybe closing some of these stores could temporarily could be good, but also there has been a lot of talk about creating just dark supermarkets forever and just having them for pickup and delivery. Thoughts?
But Phil, there's a question that occurs to me when we were even talking in the lead-in. What becomes? I mean, it boggles the mind when you think about it, because for many people, they love to go food shopping. They love the tactile experience of it, but the community hub nature of it. So, it would certainly be our hope. But I do think, concurrent to the calls for the remote stores or what have you, I still think it comes down to we're still hearing tons of concerns about social distancing not being observed, that employees are actually asking customers to mind their manners with the social distancing measures. And it's still becoming challenging for these frontline teams to be able to feel good about what they're doing.
Well,
I think some of that is, like you would point out, Meg, is just customers behaving badly.
Yeah.
So I wish people would understand that their behavior does have consequences sometimes. So if they just, behave, be kind,
and be patient. We can't continue to, because if you go to any social networks, you can really see there's just continuous comments about people being too close, not minding the directional aisles in the stores, and on and on. So it's really making a problem that doesn't need to be there in this difficult time.
So just a couple more comments, and then John, I'll throw it to you. Bill Gerlach says dark supermarkets diminish impulse buys and seasonal opportunities. And Peter Steinbrück says more and more retailers are starting their own online shopping platforms. Dark stores and curbside pickup trend or the future. John, what were you going to say?
Well, two things. One, I mean, the reason that you would do it, you guys have already discussed, which is to better enhance the social distancing issues that have occurred in stores. The other reason that you would look at doing dark stores is when your e-commerce volume becomes significant enough that it makes sense to say maybe this store or this store would be better off going all e-commerce. And the reason we hadn't seen that is because the volume really hasn't been there yet. Now, that was all until a month ago. Now, suddenly, the unlimited demand, as people have told me, for online shopping. And I think, pardon me, this is one of the ways that they're going to go about it in the future. And so trying it now, I think, is a good idea. We're seeing some retailers do it already. The idea that all stores need to, that's overblown and silly. And primarily because you're going to cut off such a huge amount of shoppers who don't do shopping any other way. They don't have access to, as you mentioned earlier before, delivery capabilities to their homes. Others, don't have access online. So there's a number of reasons not to do it as well.
Jen, before I let you comment, let's put up our first poll. And our first poll is, are you limiting the number of shoppers in your store at any particular time? So you'll see that on your screen. It's a simple yes or no answer. So we're going to give you a couple minutes to take the poll. In the meantime, Jen, what's your comment?
So we just got a report from CNR Research this morning, and they did a poll of like 2,000 shoppers at the end of March, and only 27% of, while the numbers of shoppers now shopping online and using delivery was like up, 3.5 times more, only 27% of shoppers plan to continue using that mode of grocery shopping post-pandemic. And I think, we've talked about this before. I feel like there's also this huge pent-up desire to be back out, picking up your own food, eating in restaurants, all of that. I mean, I think people are really getting tired of this new normal and are looking forward to going back to the grocery store. I can't imagine a world in which we go entirely to curbside pickup and delivery. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, and I certainly hope not, because I want to talk to Bob the butcher, and I want to get my special cuts of meat and that whole relationship, going back to what Meg was talking about a minute ago about it being the community hub that's out there. I don't know if our polling is working.
Hey, Phil, while you're fooling with that too, think about the other ancillary things that as part of the community hub, that in my supermarket, I do my banking, my dry cleaning, on and on and on. There's so many, my Starbucks, like there's a million things under one roof that has become ingrained in my routines and in my life. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. So where then does a customer then, it sort of triples the work a consumer has to seek out as well. So we're probably belaboring this topic a little bit because we all are in a full agreement that that's a rather inane idea or silly.
Let me just take one more comment and then let's move on to our next story. Dave Foreman tells us that H-E-B is limiting to 25% capacity in store. Therefore, there are still lines. They also limit delivery and curbside to 7 days out. And I have yet to get into that queue or at walmart.com or sprouts.com or randalls.com. All store in Central Texas, at least, requires kiosks for all. Last time I was in Randall's, which was Sunday at 9 a.m., I got everything on my list except yeast and rubbing alcohol without any limits. Okay, Meg, bring us to the next story.
Well, tell you what, Phil, that's an interesting thing. And I'll just back up for one pace and say that comment details the things that we're still hearing and is part very much of the aggressive news cycle that we're still continuing to, every day there's something new and something new. But the high demand for certain products is still not going away. The lines are still existing. But again, it kind of brings us back to the things that we were talking about with people liking to go to the store for right or wrong.
So will that change? I want to go back to something that Kat had talked about with this farm rescue bill, with all, $100 million worth of meat and everything else being bought. We're hearing every day, if not more than once a day, about meat processing facilities being shut down. What do we really think?
It's Columbus Junction. I just read that. It opened up today. So
but are we going to see, and I know we're going to talk a lot more about this on the Winsight webinar, which I think, Meg, is next week?
Yeah, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
1:30 Central, yes.
Yeah, but do we think that we're really going to start to see some pork and chicken and meat shortages in our stores, just as perhaps the stores are getting back to normal, they're going to be out of meat?
Good question.
The CEO of Smithfield certainly seemed to say that was a possibility. There's been a number of facilities. What was interesting was that we reported, of course, on the initial shutdown in South Dakota, and that has a cascading effect because the hams that they produce at another facility that are supplied from the South Dakota now don't have any product. So that's the kind of thing he's talking about. They need to get a handle on this. There's a lot of stuff to get through, though, in order to do that, right? They got to be able to test employees. They have to be able to keep the facilities safe. They have to find a way to work that's safe. So I think that some of these things are going to change over the longer term. And in the meantime, there might be some, short-term, supply interruptions and probably higher prices in certain cases as a result of the lack of availability.
But
And
Phil,
what-
there's no denying, though, that this comes at a time where we just published IRI's latest data today. Meat sales during the week of April 12th, Easter week, continued to rise, which gives, further evidence that people are still really buying in large quantities, and again for 3 meals a day. So meat sales are just out of hand right now. So it's an unfortunate circumstance that at a time when consumers are flooding stores with ample purchases of meat, the supply shortage might encroach on that continued movement.
So the results of our poll, no surprise, are you limiting the numbers of shoppers in your store at any particular time? 100% of the people who took the poll said yes. In fact, what we're going to do is put up another poll, and then, Jen, we've got a question specifically for you. The next poll is, at what capacity is your supermarket allowing shoppers in the store at a particular time? So at what capacity is your supermarket allowing shoppers in the store at a particular time? 51 to 75%, 26 to 50%, 1% to 26%, or none. We're only doing curbside pickup and delivery, so please take the poll. But Bill has a question for Jen. I know Jen can speak to this. At JBS Colorado, 4 corona deaths and over 100 cases, but management is determined to reopen at $4 extra per hour for workers. Jen, what do you think?
Right. I was going to say, I don't see how, this is on our news here in Denver every night that JBS, they're a U.S. subsidiary of the world's largest beef and pork processing facility. And they just yesterday closed one of their facilities in Minnesota. The one here in Greeley, which is just outside of Denver, closed on April 10th, closing it for 2 weeks. 2 deaths, I believe, and more than a dozen cases of coronavirus. And yeah, as Bill says, what they're giving employees is a $4 an hour raise. They also gave employees a $600 bonus, I think, across the board, and that was orchestrated with the UFCW, the $4 an hour raise. And they have come out and said, they're going to increase PPE for the workers, plexiglass shields where social distancing isn't possible. But, if you're risking your life, I guess $4 an hour doesn't
sound like a lot. I wouldn't do it. Would any of you? I don't care whether it's $4 or $600 or whatever, until these plants get up to speed. And we talked a little bit about this last episode as well. I don't think we're going to see it, but let's turn it around to something a little bit more positive. And what I'd like to do is Kat, ask you about how COVID-19 is bringing out the best in supermarkets and the best in the community and the best for grocery workers. Let's be a little bit more positive.
Yeah. So grocery has always been, the center of the community. They've always wanted to be that gathering spot for the people in their neighborhoods. But when everybody is quarantining, how do you do that? They are limiting the number of people in the store. They're asking you not to linger in the store, which is what they used to do. They used to have in-store classes, come gather, let's all be together. So what retailers are doing now that they've had time to kind of, catch their breath a little bit and things are starting to kind of ease into what is going to be the new normal, they're now turning to social media and they're using that platform to become the gathering spot. So they're taking the classes like Jungle Gyms in Ohio, is now taking their in-store classes that they used to have, and they're putting it out on Facebook Live. So they have their cheesemonger who is, showing how to create a cheese and charcuterie board. Because at some point, we are going to gather again. You need to know how to do that, or just be a little bit fancy for your own family.
Right.
You can make a point, or, they have their chef answering questions. People are cooking at home now. What do we do? Here's how you go it. Hy-Vee also is doing Instagram lives where they're having people call in and show how they can, make a meal out of the mealtime to go that they have. So they're creating these new communities online since people can't gather together. And I think it's wonderful that they're still trying to find ways to reach out and create that feeling of, learning, and we're all in this together.
I know a lot of retail dietitians have been doing that as well, using Facebook, using Twitter to answer people's dietary questions. So, for example, if someone is a diabetic and they can't get certain foods, what are the kind of foods that they can replace them with? Because they just don't know, because they can only see what's on the shelf at a particular time. John, we saw your story that you wrote about Kroger, and Kroger's CEO talking about that he thought that there's going to be a lot of really good learnings from this. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, Rodney MacMullen, addressed investors in an interview last week where he gave a nice look at the business, and he was pretty honest and straightforward, like he usually is about things. But seemed to really, there were a lot of things that you could look at as sort of a reluctant positive for Kroger from the fact that their competitors in many other channels are obviously shut down. But building a what they call a seamless infrastructure or architecture for their shoppers, where they can shop online and at stores and do that was an advantage to them. The fact that the country is hurtling into a recession, that could be an advantage to Kroger in the sense that people tend to come to supermarkets more particularly in the first months and year of economic downturn. So it was just it was an interesting talk he gave, and put some things that were pretty interesting. Said, for example, that regarding the availability challenges for things in stores, he said, the U.S. supply chain just wasn't built for people to buy 4 weeks of stuff at once, but just 1 week of stuff at once. That was just interesting comments from him. So.
Are these grocery store CEOs like Randy Edeker from Hy-Vee, a lot of the other ones that are either doing commercials or making these statements, are these going to be the new food celebrities? We've gotten rid of celebrity chefs. Now we're into celebrity farmers. What do you think? Now, for the first time, the average consumer is meeting these CEOs of grocery stores, and what's going to be their reaction to it? Because
hey, Phil, you're reading my mind. I just my column for our May issue details just that subject. So we talk about and I kind of, in that column, my commentary calls for CEOs of retail grocery chains to continue that front and center role, because the things with worker safety and operational conditions and supply chain shortages, these CEOs who have done this, from the likes of Amazon and Walmart, I think that MacMullen's commercials have been exceptionally convincing and exceptionally reassuring, messaging to their frontline teams. But at the same token, I think people really appreciate knowing what these leaders of these important companies that are feeding our nation right now are how their leadership is clicking. And I agree with you. I really, truly believe that from each chain's executive teams, those words of reassurance and also just plain old clarification of what these companies are doing as the rolling time continues, because this is not just going to come to an abrupt stop. I think there's going to, again, worker safety, wages, store hours, and how these chains and independents are going to evolve their operations. Talk to us all about that. And I think taking to the airwaves in a personal fashion lends a ton of credibility, authenticity, and things that really are missing a lot of times from just a standard campaign.
And I also think we're starting, the shoppers are starting to see the personalities of a lot of these retailer CEOs, that they're not just the button-down, suits and stuff like that. And I think that's important. And what brings to mind is, and I forgot his last name, but he was the Kroger, the KMA president in Dallas, and his name was Wild Bill whatever. I forgot his last name, but he, throughout Dallas, had put up billboards and with his picture and with his cell phone number. And he said, if you have a problem at Kroger, call me. And he, needless to say, had thousands of calls and so on. But we haven't seen, proactive CEOs like that for a while in the food world.
Agree. I do
go ahead, Meg.
No, can't go on.
I was just gonna say it's worked for CPG companies, when they have the maybe it's more family owned than
like Sargento ads and things like that.
Or, like Bush's Baked Beans or Smuckers, like they put that personal touch to it. So this might be something that retailers can continue on doing once this is all over, is like put a face to the brand, and because it's worked well for several brands.
Well, and from a retailer standpoint too, if you look in the Philadelphia area, Jeff Brown has done a sensational job having his face out there in the community, especially in underserved communities where he's really become their hero. And talking about heroes, Jen, I know you're working on a story about Trader Joe's with COVID-19. Give us a sneak peek.
Yeah, so we've talked about, what a great job Trader Joe's is doing with transparency. I mean, they update their website. It appears almost daily with store closures due to an employee testing positive for COVID-19, and also scheduled store cleanings in areas like New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, where there's a much higher rate of coronavirus. And one of their most recent podcasts featured commentary from Joe Basilone, their president of stores. And it was just really interesting to hear, kind of, they're not waiting on the government to tell them what to do. They're going with their gut. If they think they need to close a store to clean it for 1 day or 3 days, that's what they're going to do. And Trader Joe's has also always encouraged its employees to kind of, show customers who they really are, bring their character and their unique personality to the job. And that's really, Joe also highlighted that in this podcast, that I guess there was an employee named Jess in Long Island who decided to bring an accordion to serenade the people waiting in social distancing in line outside the store with a rendition of Piano Man. So it's an opportunity, getting back to what we were talking about, of just, happier subjects of stores and employees, connecting with people on a personal level during these difficult times.
And with that, Meg, you get the last word for today's episode. But before I let you do that, just a reminder to our audience, Thursday, we will be at 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 p.m. Pacific, right here on Winsight Grocery Business Facebook Live page. Past episodes are again on Winsight Grocery Business website, as well as supermarketguru.com. And Meg, wrap it up for us today.
Bill, really quick, one announcement is that we are this week launching a Supermarket Superheroes Facebook private group. So with that, we're just kicking it off. So we haven't gotten very far, but if anybody out there would be interested in joining, we'd love to have the participation. # Supermarket Superheroes private group. We will grant to access, but this way we can talk amongst ourselves, help each other the best way we can, be it supply shortages or any other merchandising ideas in these rough times. So please stand by for invitations and be sure to sign up as best you can early and often.
That's a great effort. And with that, thank you all for joining us. Be safe, and please make sure that you smile at customers and make sure customers smile at you.